What's your experience growing up in a haunted house? At night I would wake up to someone tapping me on the shoulder. I had a usual routine I followed when it happened, which involved burying myself under my covers and telling myself that I will count to 7 and then turn over to see what is there. Not sure if there is a significance to 7. To this day, I like to end things with 7. For example, I set my alarm for 6:27 and not 6:30. Anyways, I would go through the counting routine multiple times. I wanted to see what was there, but I was a kid and really didn't want to see what was there. My mom would tell me I just need to confront it and tell it to leave me alone. It took years to build up that courage. I don't remember exactly how long, but I must have been in my early teens before I got the courage to turn over right away and tell it to leave me alone and stop tapping me on the shoulder. Once I confronted it, it did stop. Then comes my baby sister when I was 15. She would wake up screaming in the middle of the night often. Once she was old enough to talk, she said she was scared of the hand that came up between her wall and the bed and tapped her on the shoulder at night. I grew up in a really weird penthouse before I was 12. I never liked it. The cathedral ceilings echoed every darn whisper. The upstairs had no windows and my mom and dad never furnished the space. Everything was an icy white or pale gray. The penthouse was a horrible place and I never got used to it. I should mention that now that I'm grown, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in the supernatural, and I don't think there's anything that physics and non-Newtonian physics can't explain. But I know what I know. The house was messed. At night, people would knock on the door over and over, but there would never be anyone there. It took a few months, but I learned to stop checking for visitors after dark. One night, I thought I saw the windows warp in front of my eyes. My mother said it was because I was falling asleep, but that had never happened before and has never happened since. There was a children's playground a block away in a small parkette. I could hear kids playing there all the time as sunset approached and towards bedtime. I should have known that wasn't right. I knew it wasn't right when my grandmother came to stay one night and was kept up to the wee hours of the morning by the sound of those shrieking children. My neighbors, I thought the woman next door was a tyrant. Every night she screamed at her son, every night he wept. Then they moved away, but the screaming never stopped, and the boy never sounded as if he had grown older throughout the years. My father once asked my mother if she was sleeping fine. He kept hearing her turn the faucet in the bathroom on and off throughout the night. He never asked her again after she told him she'd been sleeping through the night. Another time, the radio in my father's empty study flipped on. I comforted my mother and told her the wiring was acting up. This had never happened before and never happened again. I hated that house. I haven't lived there for decades, but I still have recurring nightmares of it. But, and I mean this, I don't believe in ghosts. I grew up in a house where things weren't quite right. It wasn't a constant thing, but enough to let you know something is not right. I was up in my room one day, it was summer and I was off from school. I was probably 14 or 15. I had a drawer that was about 3 feet high and made to fit in a corner, which was where I had it. There was a small door on the wall that opened to like an attic area. I had my stereo on top of the drawer and was listening to music. I kept hearing a vibrating noise. I got up to turn the stereo down so I could hear it, and it stopped. This happened a couple more times with me turning down the stereo to hear the noise. Finally, after turning down the stereo again, I turned it back up and waited for the noise. Sure enough, it started, but I realized it was the door to the attic area that was vibrating. I naturally thought the stereo was causing this, so I turned it down, and the vibrating door stopped. Then suddenly, with the stereo still turned down, the door started shaking violently. Like someone trying to get out. I ran downstairs and sat at the kitchen table. My mom was in the kitchen and said, "What, did you see a ghost?" I was sleeping on the couch once, again, in the summer. It was hot and the only air conditioner we had was in the living room, so I slept there to keep cool. I was sleeping with my face facing the back of the couch. I rolled over and saw my grandmother, who had passed away months before, bent over and wiping off our coffee table. She wasn't transparent or anything. It was just like seeing a real person in the darkened room. I closed my eyes tight, waited a few minutes and opened them again. She was gone. My brother slept upstairs. One night he said he was laying in bed trying to go to sleep. He heard someone come in his room. He had his back to the door. We had hardwood floors and he heard them squeaking. He said he rolled over and there was this thing about 3 feet tall covered in long hair staring at him. Then, he said it turned and ran out of the room, and he could hear its bare feet running down the hall. My mom was getting ready for bed one night. My dad worked second shift and hadn't gotten home yet. My brother and I were in the living room watching TV. My mom said she was putting on her nightgown and turned around towards the window. The shade was up maybe 4 inches, and she saw a very pale face with almost white eyes looking in at her. She stuck her tongue out at it thinking it was my dad messing with her. She came in the living room and asked where our dad went. We told her he hadn't come home yet. She freaked out. Scared the flurbo out of us. One other time my mom was in bed. Again, my father hadn't come home from work yet. The lights were off and she heard someone come in the front door. The front door opened to the living room, then there was a kind of U-shaped hallway that led to the kitchen and back door. In the hallway were a bedroom, a bathroom, then another bedroom. My parents' bedroom was the first one. So my mom hears someone come in the front door. She thinks it's my dad. Then a big dark figure comes to her bedroom door and just stands there. All she could make out was a silhouette. She says something to it, thinking it's my dad. It lingers there for a moment, turns and goes down the hallway and out the back door. A few minutes later, my dad came home and my mom asked him why he went out the back door. He hadn't been home. He didn't know what she was talking about. So he went outside to see if anyone was around, but found no one. There were other things, like my brother and I seeing a hat-wearing shadow on our bedroom door, and the door was slowing closing. We started screaming and my dad came running upstairs to see what was wrong. We told him someone was shutting our door. Again, he looked around and found nothing. We moved out when I was 15 or so. I often wonder if the people who lived there after us have had any experiences. We moved into a house built in 1980 and 1992. I had a bedroom on the top floor that always made me feel strange. I was 4 at the time. I never played in there or slept in there. I slept on the floor in my brother's room for about a year. As I got older, I got over it and started sleeping in my bedroom. Things happened in the house pretty infrequently at that time. I only really just felt as though I was being watched and ran through the house quickly at night to get into my bed. I always felt extremely exposed, and I don't know why. At one point, my dad and I were in our living room playing cards. I was maybe 8 at the time. We heard what sounded like someone walking back and forth in my brother's bedroom right above us, but no one else was home. We went upstairs to my brother's room and saw nothing. We then heard the same walking in our living room, where we were playing cards, so we went back downstairs to check, and no one was there. At that point, we heard it on our wooden basement stairs. Up and down, over and over. We checked that too, and it stopped. My dad and I both experienced this together, and neither of us could explain it. Around that time, I woke up in the middle of the night and felt this horribly depressing feeling. It was the same way the Dementors in Harry Potter make them feel. Just that all joy had been sucked away. I felt it in my soul, somehow. Like it was part of me. Then my body just started shaking like I was having a seizure. I know this sounds made up. I know it does. But my body was shaking like crazy, so I started praying, and it stopped. I was afraid to fall asleep again after that in case it could happen again. It never did. I do not have epilepsy. I was awake the entire time. I cannot explain what happened. Perhaps there's a medical explanation. I've never really looked into it. When I got older, things started getting worse. As a teenager, I would wake up in the middle of the night to the sounds of someone walking up and down the stairs right outside my door. I would hear glass breaking in the living room. I would hear shuffling. I could never find evidence that things were altered in any way. No broken glass. No furniture out of place. It was bizarre. Anyway, the scariest thing that ever happened was around 1 p.m. in the afternoon one day. I was home alone. All the doors were locked. I was taking a bath upstairs. The stairs were right outside the bathroom, directly in front of it. I was just bathing and relaxing when I heard my dog making grunting sounds. She liked to sit on our stone mantel for our fireplace, and it sounded like her little nails were scraping across the stone. She was grunting like she was being shoved, which was strange, but I didn't really think anything of it. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like an extremely heavy something storming up the stairs. We had 14 stairs, and I only heard about 5 stomps. I grew extremely still so the water in the tub wouldn't make a sound. I then heard heavy, angry breathing right outside the bathroom door. It sounded absolutely furious, and it did not sound like a human or an animal. It just sounded like primal rage. I can't really describe it. I'm not religious, but I started praying because it was all I could think to do in that moment. Suddenly, it just stopped. My adrenaline must have been insane because after a moment of being absolutely stunned, I put my towel around me and looked everywhere in my house in case there was an intruder. I checked the doors and they were all still locked. There was no one in any closet, under any bed, nothing. It was just gone. At that point, I grabbed my cordless phone, no cell phones at the time, and ran to the bottom of my driveway, where I called my best friend to come get me. I slept with the lights on for an entire year after that. When we moved out of that house, everything stopped. I never had another paranormal experience, and that was 13 years ago. Don't have an explanation, but I don't know if I even want to know, to be honest. I have lived in the same house my whole life. It's a small little one in mid-Minnesota with 6 kids living in it. I have a few personal experiences that make me believe that it is haunted. I have a couple memories of when I was younger that still do scare me a little. I used to share the upstairs bedroom with my older brother. The way it was set up is that the stairs lead from the main floor of the house into a big open upstairs room with no walls. One night, I was unable to fall asleep for some reason when out of nowhere, I hear 5 or 6 very loud stomping footsteps from the middle staircase. This freaked the flurbo out of me for 3 reasons. 1. My bed is right next to the staircase, so there's no way it could have been my brother because I would have seen him walking towards the stairs. 2. The door was really loud, so I definitely would have heard it open. 3. The staircase is like 16 steps tall, so how and why could someone get halfway up without creaking the old floorboards, stomp 6 times, and just stand there? The second occurrence in that room, I believe I actually saw whatever is in my house. I woke up in the middle of the night to some sound coming from my right. I rolled over and saw a faint outline of someone who I assumed to be my brother. That was until I heard him ask what I was doing from his half of the room. I glanced over to him and in the moment I took my eyes off of it, it was gone. That story still freaks me out. Luckily when I was 11, I got to move to the main level and got my own room. I only had 2 experiences I can remember in that room. I started collecting vinyls when I was 14, so my dad let me take his turntable into my room. I should also add that around the time I was 13, I developed a weird habit of waking up in the dead of night in extreme panic for no apparent reason, almost having full-on panic attacks. One night, I had one of these, so I was laying awake wallowing in self-pity when I heard some unfamiliar clicks coming from the shelf I had the turntable on. I assumed that they were just house sounds and ignored them. But a few days later, I went to throw on a record and I found the turntable and amplifier were both turned on. The needle for the turntable was even pushed towards the center of the table. My dad taught me to always turn everything off and to never leave it spinning to not wear out the belt. I've always been good at following this rule, so I have no idea how to explain how it got to that state. The second one wasn't as weird but personally a lot scarier. I had one of the most vivid nightmares I've ever had. I won't go into too much detail, but I will say some of the things I saw still horrify me to this day. Lucky for me, I got awoken by someone softly saying, "Hey." But when I woke up, I also heard soft whispering coming from next to me. When I checked, no one was there. It could just have been me still being groggy, but it felt so more real than that. My brother moved out the same day I turned 15. I was very excited for this. But during the moving process, I had the most vivid experiences that make me believe my house was haunted. The room is in the basement, so me and my dad had to bring my furniture downstairs for an hour or 2. During that time, I decided to tell him about that turntable incident. He went silent and when I was finished, he said, "I've been thinking the house was haunted for years."